All right, guys, welcome back to Everything College World Podcast. Today, me and Nicky are doing a preview and prediction for a major game going down in the SEC between Alabama and LSU from Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. 2.5-point favorites in favor of the visitors. 58.5 is the total. Getting things started with the Alabama offense. This is certainly a team, Nick, that sits on the outside looking in right now due to some inconsistencies. They lost on the road at Vanderbilt and at Tennessee. Neither loss really looks all that bad at this moment, especially the Commodores one, where they've played great ball since beating Alabama. Great news for the Tide in that regard. This is a must-win situation for them, though, where they can legitimately still get into the playoffs. And I think at the end of the day, they will if they can escape Baton Rouge with a victory. And it's going to come down to the shoulders of Jalen Milroe. It's a disappointing conversation I've had where he was awful against Tennessee, Nick. We thought we'd put this shaky play behind us. Thought he had improved his mechanics, his overall ability to be a downfield passer. And he was terrible against Tennessee in all regards. He wasn't running the ball very well, had 2 interceptions. I said to you right before that final drive, he's about to throw an interception. He did it on the first play. That's just the kind of vibe there was. And this is a guy who still is having a great season overall, 13 passing touchdowns, 380 yards rushing along with another 12 scores. We need to see his legs utilized more. This is certainly a vulnerable point for this LSU defense, so I certainly look for them to attack kind of like they did last year. We had a season high, or nearly a season high, 20 carries for 155 yards and 4 touchdowns. Those 2 numbers were far and away career highs for him. But we need to see him get back to showing great command of this offense. Has to be confident going on the road here, Nick. Was all right against Missouri. Has a week to settle down. He needs to be better. And if he has a game against Tennessee, Bama's season's done.
He certainly has to be better, right? We've seen Jalen Milroe struggle at points this season for the Tide, who find themselves 11th in the most recent AP poll. Interesting to see where they come out in the first college football playoff rankings that will be occurring not too long after we finish recording this episode. So I think it's going to be interesting to see where they end up. Alabama has 2 losses, but they're not bad losses. They have the second highest strength of schedule in the nation by a lot of the metrics that you see online. So they obviously have played a very tough schedule. They have that key win over Georgia. And now they have an opportunity to pick up another key win in a hostile environment in a really tough place to play in Death Valley, a place they lost the last time they played there under the lights 2 years ago in overtime in that one. Milroe, he was solid against Missouri, looked comfortable, right? 16 of 26 for 215, 8 yards per throw, not bad at all. He was, solid on the ground as well, had a rushing touchdown in that game, 50 yards on 11 carries, including a 32-yard one. So certainly showed a little bit of what you expect out of Milroe. Played better in the game against Missouri than he did the game against Tennessee, which was a really poor performance and a really poor showing in a game that really Alabama should have won against Tennessee. It definitely bothers me as an Alabama fan that they lost that game because you knew Tennessee was going to start slow, but put together as the game went on, they're going to put things together. Nico is a talented quarterback. He misses throws early on, but once he gets into his groove, he starts to hit those deep balls and he gets comfortable. And Alabama not capitalizing early in that Tennessee game, I think, was a big mistake that could haunt the Tide in the future should they miss the college football playoff. Milroe has been really good for the most part this season outside of that poor game against Tennessee and poor game against Vanderbilt at times as well. 13 touchdowns to 6 picks passing, nearly 2,000 yards passing, 67% comp rate for him. Been really good on the ground. The 12 touchdowns on the ground is a really impressive number. 380 as well is a phenomenal number for him on the ground when he does run. I've seen him be a little more hesitant this year to run than he was in the previous year, which is a little concerning. I think they want to continue to rely on him to run. I think he's your best option to do so. We saw him have a really dominant day against his LSU defense last year. Milroe's best asset is his legs. You might as well use it, especially against a team that you torched in the past on the ground. I think I'd like to see a lot of that on Saturday.
And of course, to help Milroe out, the rest of the supporting cast needs to continue to show good balance. And, you start with a run game where they beat Missouri 34-0, a team that's incredibly hobbled, a team that's also not very good. But at the end of the day, if they're playing poor football, the result at the end would not have been what it was. So I think it's certainly impressive to see them put up 271 and 4 touchdowns on the ground. You've seen, Richard Young rip off a 62-yarder. He had 2 30-plus yard runs from Milroe and Haynes, and then Jam Miller had 48 yards and a team-high 2 rushing touchdowns. This is a run game that has, been criticized over the last couple of years, quite frankly. They've just not been the same. There was plays against Georgia where the running backs would just get, they'd see someone coming and they would just freeze up. It was very strange where they were just not putting in 110% effort like in the USF game. They were playing with great tenacity, and you just haven't seen that consistency from these running backs. Against Vandy and Tennessee, less than 90 yards rushing as a team. The bread and butter is going to be running the football here because Milroe, even though he has shown, nice progressions, certainly is not a guy you want to be throwing 40 times per game to try and win the game with his arm. I think if they have a nice balanced approach, they're a very dangerous offense. And Jam Miller and Justice Haynes are going to have to continue to be special, Nick, not just in running the ball, but pass protection as well. And whenever they're called upon in the passing game, this is a running back group that I think is playing with some nice momentum. And with Miller's legs, they should have a pretty sound day running the football, but will be an elite day.
I think they need to have a strong day running the ball. This is a rushing attack that has some good pieces, but they haven't been fully able to commit to the run and be as effective as you would hope. They're averaging 176 yards per game this season, 3.5 rushing touchdowns per game. A lot of that is because of Milroe, but you want to see a little bit higher because this is a running back room I think does have some talent. Jam Miller's a solid player, 450, 6.1 and 7 carries, touchdowns that is. While Justice Haynes has 350, 6.4 and 5 touchdowns. Good numbers, but you could expect you feel like you get more out of this running back room. I agree with you. I've seen some hesitancy from running the ball. They were strong against Missouri. That was a really good day on the ground. I think they can have a good day here. We've seen LSU be a little vulnerable to the run in the past. I think this is an opportunity for Alabama to have a good day on the ground, attack them, chew some clock, and really play the game at their own pace, put the game in their own hands in a hostile environment. Really could be a key thing for this offense.
Now you look at the pass catchers for Alabama. Ryan Williams, of course, phenomenal true freshman. Been a little bit quieter as you really since the Georgia game. I mean, he still made an elite grab against Vanderbilt. Had 8 grabs for 73 yards against Tennessee of a touchdown. I say quieter because he's not putting up the ungodly numbers we saw early on in the year. But he's still going to be the focal point for this receiving core. And, alongside him is Gurmy Bernard finally stepping up. He's got 70-plus yards in 4 straight games. That's great news. He has 30 receptions as well on the season. They finally are starting to, figure out who's going to be the go-to guys in this offense. CJ Dupree starting to put up a little bit more production. Guys like Kobe Prentice, Josh Cuevas at tight end, Kendrick Law, I think he's finally healthy. These are guys that I think can be leaned on eventually, especially Law and Prentice, who have some nice skills and some speed. But right now it's the Williams and Bernard show, Nick, and these guys are going to have to continue to be big.
These guys have to be big. This has to be a big, strong showing from these wide receivers that have shown a lot of talent. Certainly Ryan Williams, the youngster, the 17-year-old, has been phenomenal this year. 702 yards receiving, 20 yards per grab, and 7 scores. Has slowed down a little bit. I think, Milroe has probably been targeting him too much. We saw them, spread the ball out a little bit better, throw to a more different variety of wide receivers in the Missouri game after he targeted Ryan Williams a lot in the Tennessee game. I'd like to see some variety, spread the ball out a little bit here. You do have some talented players around. CJ Dupree, I like getting the tight end involved. 169, 12.1 for him. No scores, but he's been really solid. Jeremy Bernard is a really talented player who is getting more grabs as the season goes on. 463, 15.4, and 2 scores for him. Kobe Prentice has been getting involved a little bit. Kendrick Law has been getting involved as well a little bit more. I want to see big days of those 2 guys to step up and fill in some of those holes. I'd like to see this become a more rounded passing attack like it was in the Missouri game, slowly developing into a more rounded show instead of a one-trick pony sort of thing it was with Ryan Williams early on in the season. I like that balance. I like the well-roundedness from this Alabama offense with these pass catchers.
The return of Caden Proctor, midpoint in the season, certainly led to more consistency up front at left tackle. He's a great leader for them. Left guard Tyler Booker, he's been having a great year in pass pro, as is Parker Brailsford. And, of course, right guard Jade Roberts is a phenomenal run blocker. This offensive line has too much talent to not be getting the, generating the push that we expect, Nick, so I certainly want to see them continue to be emphatic when it comes to running the ball and being physical. Then over at right tackle, Elijah Pritchett, this guy is just abysmal. He probably should just give up at this point. He was terrible against Tennessee, wasn't good against Vanderbilt. They ended up causing a forced fumble late in the game because he can't block anybody, Nick. They're going to have to find ways to try and give help to the right side. You usually don't see chips on the right side, extra tight ends over there. They got to do something, man, because this right tackle spot is probably the worst in the conference, quite frankly.
It is a problem. The right tackle has been a big issue. Penalties coming out of that right side, whether it is Pritchett or Wilkin Formby. A lot of penalties, a lot of mistake out of that right side. I certainly agree with you. They should add an extra blocker there. There have been times where the running back is not blocked and they've got a free hit on the quarterback. We saw it in the South Carolina game. We saw it in the Tennessee game as well, and at times in the Vanderbilt game, and occasionally in the Missouri game as well, right? You got to be better on that right side. It's been a big issue. This offensive line has a lot of key pieces like Proctor, like Booker, like Parker Brailsford, who has plugged in as a transfer and been great. Jaden Roberts, I've been really impressed with him. He's quietly having a great season, but right tackle is continuing to be a big issue, and it's really holding this team back. Penalties, mistakes there, missing blocks there, really big and a really big problem. In a environment like Death Valley where it's going to be so loud down the field at a night game, you're not going to be able to hear anything. If that right tackle is not fully on his game, making mistakes, false starts over and over again, it's not setting up properly, illegal formations, things like that, it could really be a problem because those self-inflicted wounds have hurt Alabama. We saw that in the Tennessee game, and they hurt them on the road over and over again. Could certainly be a problem for Kalen DeBoer's offense.
Now we move to the LSU offense. You start with Garrett Nussmeier, guy who's a pure gunslinger, almost 42 attempts per game, though. They've certainly had to really lean on his services a good bit. And I mean, how frustrating was it to watch the A&M game where after beating Ole Miss due to him making some great plays, still only completed 43%, had 2 picks, stepped up and clutched up late, though, to win that contest. They were up against A&M, seemed like things were trending in the right direction. It was just a second half from hell, Nick. They were terrible. I mean, they had 3 interceptions total, some really bad ones as well, only completed 50%. Nussmeier, from one half to the other, just looked like a complete shell of himself, quite frankly, and it led to them dropping their second game of the year, what also makes this a must-win for LSU. And there's a lot on Nussmeier's shoulders the first year as a starter. This is a guy, again, who airs out the ball a tremendous amount. The run game hasn't been a tremendous help from them. So, I mean, there's a lot on this young man's shoulders, and I certainly understand that some of the struggles are not great. But again, this is a guy that's being leaned on way too much. But this is a guy who can certainly flip the script at any moment of his ability to throw the football.
This is certainly a talented quarterback. I think he is being relied on a little too much, and that's certainly part of the problem for this LSU team that's led to them picking up 2 losses this season and finding them into a tough spot after dropping that game at Texas A&M, losing in that one by 15 points. They find this a tough spot, but Nussmeier, he's a very accurate quarterback at times, a very talented quarterback, but also we've seen him be a little more inaccurate in recent weeks and make mistakes. 333 attempts, certainly one of the higher numbers in the country, 62% comp rate, 2,600 yards passing, 20 touchdowns, but 9 interceptions. That's certainly a number that's bothering me. We've seen him get a little more loose with the ball as of late and make mistakes, which is certainly costing this LSU team. If he's throwing interceptions, that can certainly put them in a bad position. You know, he had 3 against A&M. That's certainly concerning when you look at that coming into a situation where Alabama has had a few games this year where they've gotten a couple interceptions. Secondary is looking solid at times. They were really good against Tennessee. The secondary had multiple turnovers in that one. They were good against Missouri as well, multiple turnovers. So, you know, certainly concerning if you're an LSU fan, because I think Nussmeier has a chance to turn the ball over once, twice, maybe 3 times in this game on Saturday night, because he has a tendency just to kind of be loose with it, absolutely just rip it down the field and kind of be a little inaccurate, make mistakes there.
Caden Durham has been an unsung hero for them at running back, but you know the yard totals have not been great against tougher defenses. 12 for 37 against Ole Miss, 11 for 15 rushing against A&M. Those 2 games they've just had not been able to sustain any type of balance at all. He has 3 other games this year of 98-plus yards, a couple of multi-TD games as well. This is a very good running back who, again, has been a really impressive unsung hero for them. He's in a run of plenty of toughness, has shown the ability to be effective as a pass catcher as well. Did have 56 yards on 4 receptions against the Aggies. This is a guy that's going to be a focal point. Josh Williams will get on the field. He's bigger of their bigger back at 210 pounds. He will get short work and goal line work and all that. Other than that, though, Nick, this backfield has not been providing a whole lot, and it's not great. And I don't think it's from the lack of the O-line play. I just think that they certainly lack talent. And when your top running back's a true freshman that we really didn't even know about coming into the season, that's certainly a big issue.
This is certainly something where the running back room has been weak this year, averaging 115 yards per game, which is not a number that you would really hope for in this offense. You know, Durham has been really good. I've been impressed. I like watching him play. 400 yards rushing, 5.4 yards per carry, 6 scores. Josh Williams, 241, 4 yards per carry, and 3 scores. Durham has taken that mantle as RB1 when it seemed like a wide open room at the start of the season. I think he's been good. I really like what Durham can do as a young freshman. He's a really talented player that's stepping up. But this is a running back room that if Alabama can stuff the run and force Nussmeier to throw over and over again, while Nussmeier is an incredible passer, if he has a lot of attempts, he's going to end up making mistakes, end up incompleting passes, being inaccurate at times. I think the key for Alabama is stuff the run, find a way to prevent them, keep them off schedule, and they'll certainly put themselves in a good spot.
This is an LSU offense. It's 4th in FBS in 10-plus yard passing plays. And, of course, that's a high-volume passing attack. They have guys that are really good in the short to intermediate range. Kyron Lacey, of course, taking over as the top wide receiver, has been highly impressive this year. Aaron Anderson, the Alabama transfer, we knew he was going to have a big-time season year for the Tigers this year, Nick. And he has so far 614 yards, 4 touchdowns, 36 grabs. Big fan of what he provides from an athletic standpoint. Coming off a season-high 126 yards. And then Mason Taylor at tight end. This guy's an old-school type of player for them. C.J. Daniels looks like he's probable for this game. We'll see if he ends up playing. That'll certainly be a major boost for them. Xavier Thomas, kind of a gadget player. They get involved every, here and there. What do you make of this LSU receiving group? Because these really are some special players.
There are some talented players here. At the start of the season, we were worried what the LSU pass attack would look like. They lost incredibly talented players to the NFL draft. They had to replace a ton of talent, including Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. You wonder what the drop-off would be like because the names on paper didn't hit that star level, but these guys always turn out and they play well. You can always bet on an LSU wide receiver. These are incredibly talented players. They know how to get the best talent out of them in Baton Rouge, and you're seeing that again. Kyron Lacey's been really good, 6'18", 15.1 and 6 scores. Aaron Anderson, 6'14", 17.1 and 4 scores. He's been good. Mason Taylor, a great tight end, 369, 9.5 and 2 scores for them. Durham's been really good at the backfield. Xavier Thomas has been really solid as well. Josh Williams has been okay at times this season as well. CJ Daniels missing is certainly a loss for this offense, I think. You can definitely say that missing him would be a disappointing thing to see. He's a solid player at the Z, a really good graduate transfer who's come over and plugged in well. But overall, this is a deep wide receiver room with a lot of talented pieces.
Now we look at an offensive line that I think is the nation's best, especially in pass protection. Will Campbell on the left side had some issues against the Aggies. He had his best game of the year against Ole Miss, though, so he certainly is capable against tough defenses. Garrett Dellinger, left guard, he's going to be out for this game, probably the next couple of weeks. Paul Mubenga, he's going to fill in for him. He's only played about 90 reps this season. We'll see how he holds up. Being at home, I think, will certainly help with communication. Be a little bit more concerned on the road. At center, a bit of a liability in DJ Chester. This is a former 5-star. He's a freshman getting put into the starting lineup, so you're certainly going to expect a bit of a bumpy road for him. Miles Frazier, he's been tremendous in pass protection at right guard. And over at right tackle, Emory Jones is just not really taking that next step like we envisioned he would. He's also kind of like Elijah Pritchett, had some really tough problems against better defenses. He got whooped against Ole Miss. It wasn't as bad, but he did give up a sack against the Aggies. So this is an offensive line, Nick, that I think is incredibly great. But you talk about some of the struggles that I've alluded to, and now you're losing a great starting player at left guard, and maybe all of a sudden they're not going to be even close to what they are capable of.
Certainly some concerns about this offensive line. I think, if they want to be able to run the ball, the offensive line has to be very strong. Alabama has a really good pass rush. We've seen that at times this season where they've been able to get in the backfield. They had success, rushing the passer against Missouri. So I think this is a big key point. Can this offensive line stand up? Losing Dillinger is definitely a big loss. Jones has really not been super impressive. DJ Chester has been good as a younger player. Miles Frazier's been solid as well. Will Campbell's a really talented player as well. A really great, phenomenal player at left tackle. So I think this offensive line is a bit of a patchwork unit right now, but I still think it's a very strong unit. We'll see what type of success they can have against Alabama, but I'm liking Alabama's chances to win the battle in the trenches and the defensive line and get some pressure similar to what Ole Miss was able to do.
Now we look at the Alabama defense, a unit that struggled this year against the run for the most part. I thought they were good against Tennessee in that first half. They started getting grinded down on, though, late in that game. Ended up losing in that one. Vanderbilt on the stat sheet only had 166 yards on 54 carries, but they were playing smash mouth football, and they weren't phased one bit. It was hard to create negative plays against the Commodores. South Carolina had some bright spots as well. I mean, this just has not been an overwhelmingly great run defense. Their best effort of the year came against Georgia, who surprisingly can't run the football at all. So this is a D-line that I would say is, somewhat underachieving this year because I think they're incredibly deep. And I think they have great talent, but with a week to get fresh and healthy, hopefully get motivated as well. LT Overton's really stepped up his play, though, over the last couple of weeks. Has really emerged as a big-time playmaker. Jamarian Latham, Tim Keenan, Tim Smith. I think Damon Payne's a really good player. Kondarius Robinson's been an impressive edge rusher for them. And I've got, of course, guys like Q Rasaw and James Smith. I mean, this is the utmost talent, Nick. There's a lot of size here, a lot of big bodies, a lot of 5-star prowess as well. And they shouldn't have any issues against the run here against LSU. But if the Tigers, for some reason, start ripping off some big runs, I'll be vastly disappointed because it should not happen in this game.
Should not happen in this game. This is an incredibly talented unit going against a patchwork offensive line. I think they can easily win this battle. I like their potential to win this battle. This would be a huge opportunity for Alabama to get some pressure, look good here, be strong in the trenches. Tim Keenan, 28 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks for him. LT Overton, 24 total tackles, 2 sacks for him. Jamarian Latham has been really good, 24 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, plus a sack. Tim Smith, 23 total tackles, plus a sack for him. Quindarius Robinson, he's been really solid, a good X factor, 21 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, at highest totals on the team in both categories there. Q Rasaw has been really good, 19 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, plus a sack, while James Smith's been solid in rotation with 9 total tackles and 2 pass breakups on the line. This is a really strong unit. I really like what this unit's been able to do so far. They got to be strong here, right? They got to be good against the run. They got to stuff the run. I like the matchup. It's going to be a key one to keep an eye on Saturday, certainly.
Now you look at the middle of their defense, one of the top linebacking groups in all of America, Deontay Lawson. Very happy with his improvements over the past couple of years. He's a borderline elite against the run so far this year. Chad Campbell, as well as a full-time starter, has been tremendous, especially in coverage. He has phenomenal athletic ability. And then Justin Jefferson at times has come in and provided some very impressive quality play for them. Again, Nick, the run game shouldn't be much of a factor here. This should be a one-dimensional LSU offense. What kind of role will these linebackers play on Saturday?
I like what this linebacking unit can do. This is a really talented unit with some incredibly talented players. Deontay Lawson, Jahad Campbell have been really good so far this season. Campbell 6'6" total tackles, and Lawson is 6'6" as well. They both tied at the top of the team with 6'6" total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss for Campbell, 5 for Deontay Lawson, 2 sacks for each of them, plus a pick for Campbell. They've been really good. These are key players here. I like to see the matchup advantage certainly in this game. Justin Jefferson's been great in rotational reps, 29 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. He had a huge tackle for loss in the game against Missouri. I like what he can do a lot. He's a really talented player, Jefferson, a younger player that's been good. Jeremiah Alexander's been solid at times as well in rotational appearances. I like this linebacking core, a really good veteran leadership. Campbell and Lawson, top tackles of the team for a reason. Really talented, good guys that look to have a strong game here.
And obviously the Alabama secondary is going to have the biggest responsibilities of the game. Early on in the year, they didn't look all that great. Against Georgia, they were abysmal in the second half. Vanderbilt had a lot of success against South Carolina late in the game. They left a guy wide open for a touchdown. And I was concerned that similar would happen against Tennessee, and they probably played their best game of the year. Got beat on like one go route down the sideline. That was pretty much it. Held them to less than 200 yards. Had 2 interceptions as well. You knew there'd be, a bit of a learning curve here. Damani Jackson transferring over after not being all that great at SC. And then you have a bunch of younger cats like Xavier Brown, Jalen Mabwakbi, another transfer into Sean Jones. I mean, this is a very well put together secondary in terms of talent, but a lot of youth here. And Devontae Smith has been really impressive for them in the slot. And then, of course, you have the lone veteran, Malachi Moore at safety, and then Keon Sabb. He's been a little bit quieter since early on in the season, but he's still an impactful run defender and can make waves in coverage. Moore, though, he's been elite in all regards. What do you make of this secondary, Nick? It seems like they've put some of those early season struggles behind them, but again, against a high-volume passing attack, I don't expect there to be, too many bright spots for Alabama at times, because I think they might get carved up, but for the most part, there's going to be opportunities to create. Can they do it?
The secondary is developing and turning into a really solid unit. They had a lot of raw talent on paper, but they're a very young unit. A lot of questions about whether or not they'd be able to succeed at the high level this year. I've been impressed. Malachi Moore, the veteran leader, had that issue at the end of the Vanderbilt game where, a little concerned about his behavior in that one, but he's been playing well. He's a really good leader for this team. 46 total tackles for him, 1.5 tackles for loss, 2 picks, 5 pass breakups. Keon Sabb has plugged in really well. 39 total tackles, 2 picks, 4 pass breakups. Damani Jackson, 27 total tackles, 2 picks, 5 pass breakups. Bray Hubbard, the sophomore, the younger player at free safety, has been really good for this team. 27 total tackles, a pick for him. Devontae Smith, 15 total tackles, 5 pass breakups. Mbakwe, 13 total tackles, 2 pass breakups plus a pick. Xavier Brown, 11 total tackles plus a pick and 2 pass breakups. to Sean Jones, 11 as well, and 2 pass breakups. The production of this unit's really solid. I like what I've seen so far. A really good secondary that's having a solid season. They're really talented on paper. We wonder how they play, once they got on the field. They're getting better as time goes on. I like what the secondary can do.
Now you'll move to an LSU defense. It's much improved this year. They've also had some rough outings of their own. Against South Carolina, got dominated against the run for 243, gave up 242 against A&M. A big bulk of that really came when Marcel Reed came in the game and completely flipped the script, and that's something South Carolina has, a dual-threat quarterback and a running back that can certainly make you pay, and they've just been vulnerable on the boundary this year. They're 128th in FBS and 4 50-plus yard runs allowed. And the quarterback run, I think, has played a large factor in that, because we alluded to how good this defense had been since they lost that athletic ability in Harold Perkins due to Whit Weeks stepping up. But now they're really going to need that the aforementioned athletic ability, it seems, and he's going to be major in that. Was kind of quiet against the Aggies, but he really has been a monster this year. With a couple weeks to get healthy, I think he's going to certainly make a big impact in this contest. Greg Penn next to him. It's a pretty stellar 1-2 punch, quite frankly. I like what they have in terms of defensive ends, and Braden Swinson. I always thought he was a really good player. He's really taken over this year. 10.5 TFL, 8 sacks, and of course next to him another veteran, Savion Jones. A handful of different defensive linemen here. It's not that deep of a group though. Paris Shan, Gio Paz, some average players. Ahmad Brooks, he's playing pretty solid, and Javier Suggs whenever he gets on the field as well. What do you make of this defensive line? Overall, the front seven, Nick, has been burned against the run in a couple of games that are very similar to the style we're going to see on Saturday from Alabama.
Certainly concerned if you're an LSU fan that the running attack could really have a strong day here. I do like what this defensive line has. I like the pieces here. I like what the linebacking core does too. Whit Weeks leads the team in tackles, 75 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, a pick, 2 pass breakups. Greg Penn's been really good, 59 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. Braden Swinson's been a really good home wrecker, 34 total tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, leads the team in both categories there. Savion Jones, 26 total tackles, 5.5 tackles lost, 4.5 sacks. Harold Perkins has been, good when he's fully healthy. He's still a really talented player. If he can get fully healthy on the field, he's a difference maker. 16 total tackles for him. Gio Paz has been good as well. 15 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, plus a sack. This front seven has some nice pieces. The depth is okay as well at times. I like what this unit can do, but they've gotten gut punched against the run a couple of times this season. They're going to have to prevent that in this game. If Alabama can have success on the ground, particularly with Milroe having success on the ground, it could be a very long day for them like it was last year when the two teams met in Tuscaloosa.
And Weeks is a bit of an inconsistent performer in coverage as well. I think LSU is certainly going to have to look to bring in extra defensive backs into the box to make plays against the run. I just don't know who it will be. Jordan Gilbert and Sage Ryan really aren't that good against the run, not all that sound in terms of tackling. Pretty all right in coverage, I guess. In the slot, you have a guy Major Burns, who's a veteran. Really, again, isn't much better in terms of those qualities, and he's also been kind of disappointing in coverage in his own right. I think at corner, the only guy who's really a bright spot in the secondary is Zaya Alexander, and they've just loved the return of him because he has been a very efficient tackler, and he's been phenomenal in coverage as well. Ashton Stamps has been left on an island a lot this year, and he's not been all that great. He's given up, almost 350 yards in coverage this season. And then J.K. Johnson, I'm not even sure if he's healthy yet. So, there's not a lot of depth here in this secondary, Nick, and the guys they do have are veteran players, but they're not all that good in terms of the abilities to stop the run and make tackles. So, you talk about concerns, it seems like that's going to be a big one.
That is a big concern. The secondary is a little bit weaker of a unit that lacks that key depth that you need in a big game like this. Certainly concerning. Major Burns has been a good leader for this team. 41 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, 2 pass breakups. Sage Ryan, 29 total tackles for him, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, plus 3 pass breakups. Maybe you throw him in the box. I think that's certainly an opportunity. Ashton Stamps has been left on an island by himself a lot. Like you said, he was in that one-on-one coverage a ton, 29 total tackles, 7 pass breakups. Maybe there's a matchup advantage potentially there for him. Key to see who he's going to be matched up against on Saturday. Jordan Gilbert, 24 total tackles for him, 1 interception, 3 pass breakups. Zaya Alexander, 14 total tackles, 2 picks, 3 pass breakups. This is a big key thing for me. This team does not have a lot of interceptions this year, 4 to be exact. They're not a ball hawking unit. They don't really get a lot of those opportunities. That certainly plays an advantage of Milroe, who has thrown interceptions at time this season, but if he's not going to throw an interception this game, I think that certainly does benefit Alabama significantly. I like what the matchup looks like potentially compared to for the secondary for Alabama.
Yeah, looking at the snap count against A&M, it was just those two guys at corner. They have nobody else they're throwing out there, and I think Stamps is a bit vulnerable. Even the matchups of Ryan Williams will certainly be very competitive. What are the tail of the tape, the team comparisons, I think, on offense? It's split. Bama at quarterback and at running back. Well, wide receiver and offensive line will go to the Tigers. I think the defensive edges all go to Alabama. The only one potentially being offset would be maybe defensive end because Swinson's that good of a player and he's been highly productive, unlike anyone really on Alabama's defense. But I think these are pretty clear cut and dry, Nick. I think that there's a nice rosters top to bottom. I think the Tide clearly have some edges in certain areas.
Yeah, I agree with you here. I say this every single week, but these big SEC matchups, these teams are very, very even when you do pick one advantage from to the other. It's a very close thing. You look at it, it's really tight. I think maybe defensive line you give to LSU, but outside of that, this makes a lot of sense to me. Very balanced. 2 really good teams going at it on Saturday night.
Looking at the final thoughts and the prediction keys to the game. I think for Bama, we got to play smart, sound, and clean football. They've just been really bad on the road over the past couple of years. Supporting cast continue to be balanced. More guys than just Ryan Williams and Milroe doing the job. Need to see everyone continue to be good. For LSU, got to contain that QB run. If this game is fully in the hands of Nussmeier, he needs to avoid silly mistakes. Some of those picks against A&M were pretty bad. I think Alabama's going to win this game, Nick, and I know I haven't picked them to lose many games, and I know they haven't played very good football up until this point. They've underachieved at this moment in time. LSU, I think they're right around kind of what we expected. Their backs are against the wall as well, as they certainly think they might have a shot at the playoffs still if they can win this game. I just think Alabama's going to have too much with the QB run. They finally, last year, you've seen it, let Milroe loose running the football, and he gashed them. And I just don't think they're any better this year in terms of being able to contain that QB run. And I think having, pretty much 2 weeks to prepare, DeBoer's going to have a nice plan in place to expose this defense. I think LSU, for the virtue of just being at home, is going to keep it close, a 7-point game. And I think Alabama probably will make a couple silly mistakes or two, whether it be on the offensive line or in coverage or whatever. They'll keep the Tigers in it. But quite frankly, Alabama should win this game, Nick, on the road, and potentially punch their ticket to the playoffs because the rest of the way is pretty easy for the Tide. But I think they're licking their chops here, Nick, because I'm seeing some of these matchups. I think they might flat out dominate this game, but I just know it won't happen.
They like a lot of the matchups, but this is certainly going to be a close game. This is a rivalry that's a very interesting one since the game of the century, the first one in 2011. The last 13 games, Alabama is 11-2 against LSU with the 2 losses coming in the second game of the century in 2019 against that super team, and then the one 2 years ago in 2022. I was at that game where number 10 LSU upset Alabama in overtime in a crazy game. That atmosphere was very loud that night. I certainly learned firsthand how tough it is for anyone to play in that ballpark. Alabama has had success in Baton Rouge though in some of these key games. They won in 2012, and what was a top 5 matchup they won in 2018, and what was a top 3 matchup as well. They won another top 10 matchup in years past as well. So there's certainly been good matchups. The only 2 games that have really been dominating blowouts or non-ranked matchups in the past couple of years. The only 2 non-ranked matchups, the COVID year and then 2021. A lot of these games have been super close, a couple blowouts though. This is going to be a back and forth affair. I certainly think these teams will go at it over and over again. I think it will be close. I think Alabama certainly has the advantage on the ground. I think they can really gut punch this LSU run defense. I think Milroe is that absolute difference maker. We saw that last year where he really took over the game. I want him to do the same thing again on Saturday. He's got to take over the game. He's got to be super talented on the ground. He's got to be aggressive. He has to have a good day on the ground. They got to run the ball with him a lot. I want to see them get the running backs involved. I want to see them attack gut punch over and over again, trying to attack the secondary as well potentially. I want to see Ryan Williams get a good amount of targets, although don't make it too obvious. I like the Alabama defense have a solid day here. I think Nussmeier is a threat, but I think they can potentially pick him off, get some good field position based off of that. This is a very intense game. Winner go home certainly for both these teams. The loser will be missing the playoff. The winner will have a very clear and easy pathway to the college football playoff with the way things are shaking out. Alabama certainly has to go out there and win this game. They want to be in the playoff. Same deal for LSU. Winner go home. This is a big opportunity. You wouldn't want anything else. A rivalry game to decide who could potentially go to the college football playoff. A great way to end your Saturday night. A key matchup going down in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, and the game against Wisconsin was a great example of them playing clean football, and they were good in all regards, and they blew them out. That was a highly impressive effort, one of the better ones on the year, probably the best one of the year, quite frankly, for the Tide. And I think you're going to see a little bit more of that, probably about 70-80% in terms of clean football, and I think you're certainly going to see that reflected in the final score. So I'll be disappointed if they don't do that, Nick. I think Bama wins. That's going to be it for today's episode. As always, appreciate you joining.
Hey, looking forward to this one. Can't wait for this matchup.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.
Yeah.